Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to explore A Tale of Love and Darkness by Amos Oz.
Oh, yeah.
It's a powerful memoir, and I think you'll find it fascinating to kind of journey with Oz through his childhood
Yeah.
in Jerusalem. You'll get a real sense of what it was like to grow up during this pivotal moment in history,
Mm.
experiencing both the dream of a nation and then kind of the harsh realities of war. But even more than that, I think what's so compelling about this book is the intensely personal story of Oz's family,
Uh-huh.
particularly his mother.
Right.
So, okay, let's dive in.
Let's dive in.
The book opens in Jerusalem in the 1940s.
Okay.
British rule is ending, tensions are rising, and young Amos is growing up in a family that's deeply immersed in intellectualism.
I see.
His parents are European Jewish immigrants,
Mm.
and they seem much more at home in the world of books than, like, the realities of Palestine.
What's fascinating is how this sets up a sense of almost two worlds existing side by side.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have this looming threat of war.
Right, the very real dangers of living in Jerusalem at that time.
Uh,
But inside Oz's home, it's like this haven of European culture. Right.
Multiple languages, constant discussions of literature and history.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, did this intellectual bubble offer them a kind of escape, or was it actually a barrier to fully engaging with their new surroundings?
It's such a great question, and I think it seems like Oz's parents each represent a different side of this dynamic.
Okay.
His father, Yehuda,
Yeah.
is this scholar.
Mm-hmm.
He finds solace in his books, in his work as a librarian.
Right.
And he's very pragmatic, almost detached. But then you have his mother, Fania.
Fanya's character is so compelling, and I think her story speaks to a deeper layer of what it meant to be a Jewish immigrant in Palestine at that time.
Yeah.
Yes, she's melancholic,
Hmm.
but her sadness reveals this profound sense of displacement. She never truly feels at home in Jerusalem, and this longing for something else,
Yeah.
perhaps for the Europe she left behind,
Mhm.
permeates everything. You can almost feel the weight of that unspoken sadness.
Yeah.
She even tells Amos these dark, sometimes tragic fairy tales, which seem to foreshadow her own fate.
Those fairy tales are crucial because they offer a glimpse into Fania's internal world, a world that seems at odds with the Zionist dream
Right.
that many around her are embracing. It makes you consider how individual experiences can be so different from the grand narratives of history.
And as the political situation in Palestine deteriorates, that contrast becomes even more pronounced. In 1948, with the UN partition plan and the subsequent war,
Yeah.
everything changes. Suddenly, the family's intellectual world collides with these harsh realities of survival.
This is where we see the impact of those external forces really hitting home. The family has to adapt to confront aspects of themselves they might never have imagined. We even see Oz's gentle father learning to handle a gun.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder that war doesn't discriminate. It forces everyone to change.
And for Fania, who's already struggling, the war seems to just exacerbate everything.
Right.
She retreats further into herself. Her emotional state deteriorates. It's heartbreaking, especially because young Amos senses her pain but can't fully grasp its depth.
And this is where the book really prompts us to think about the unspoken struggles that people endure, especially in times of upheaval.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health wasn't openly discussed back then.
Mm-hmm.
So Fania likely felt very isolated in her despair.
It's a powerful reminder that even amidst these major historical events, individual stories of suffering can easily be overlooked or misunderstood.
And in Fania's case, I think it's important to consider the cultural context.
Yes.
Was her depression solely a personal struggle,
Mm-hmm.
or was it also a reflection of the unspoken pressures on women at the time? Was there an expectation to conform to a certain ideal, to suppress their own needs for the sake of the family or the nation?
Those are excellent points. The book doesn't explicitly delve into those questions, but it certainly invites us to consider them. Oz doesn't shy away from portraying these complex dynamics within his family. For example, he contrasts his parents' personalities quite vividly. We've talked about his father being drawn to the world of ideas, but how would you characterize his relationship with Fania? Was there a lack of emotional connection that contributed to her decline?
It's a complex relationship, for sure. Oz hints at a distance between them, perhaps even a sense of incompatibility.
Right.
His father, immersed in his books,
Uh-huh.
seems almost emotionally unavailable.
And that disconnect speaks volumes, I think. It highlights the limitations of intellectualism when it comes to confronting deep emotional pain.
Yeah.
Yehuda may have been a brilliant scholar, but he seems ill-equipped to deal with Fanya's internal struggles.
Yeah, and tragically, those struggles culminate in Fanya taking her own life when Oz is just 12.
It's so sad.
This event becomes a defining moment in the book, a turning point that forces young Amos to confront profound loss, but also the limitations of language in the face of such suffering.
This section of the book is so poignant. Oz doesn't shy away from portraying the rawness of his grief, the confusion and the anger.
Right.
But what's equally striking is how he describes the aftermath, the silence, the unspoken grief that hangs over the family. They try to erase it, pretend it never happened.
Yeah. Do you think this silence, this inability to process grief, openly reflects something about the cultural norms of the time?
Absolutely. In the 1950s, suicide was a taboo subject, something to be hidden away. It wasn't something you discussed openly, especially not within a family that prided itself on intellectualism. It's almost as if their refuge in the world of books becomes this barrier to genuine emotional expression.
And that seems to have a profound impact on Oz's own relationship with literature.
Yeah.
He experiences this disillusionment, a recognition that the world doesn't always conform to the neat narratives we find in novels. And this pushes him to seek a completely different path.
Like what?
At just 14, he leaves his family, his home in Jerusalem, and the world of books behind to join a kibbutz. He even adopts a new name, Oz, meaning strength.
Wow, that's a drastic shift.
Yeah.
He goes from this intellectual, somewhat sheltered upbringing to embracing hard labor, communal, living a life deeply connected to the land. What was it about the kibbutz movement that appealed to young people at the time? Was it seen as a way to escape the complexities of city life, or was there something more to it?
The kibbutz movement represented a kind of utopian ideal. It was about building a new society from scratch, based on principles of equality, shared labor, and a return to the land for many young Israelis, especially those who had experienced the trauma of war. It offered a sense of community purpose and a way to contribute to nation building.
And for Oz, who's trying to find his own strength to forge a new identity apart from his family's past, it makes sense that he would be drawn to this.
It was also a rejection of his father's world, wasn't it? The intellectual life, the world of books, it all seemed to crumble in the face of his mother's death. The kibbutz offered a way to engage with the world in a more tangible, physical way.
But even though Oz throws himself into this new life, he can't completely escape his past. It seems like no matter how hard he tries to bury it, it keeps resurfacing.
This is where the book takes another fascinating turn. On the surface, Oz is embracing this rugged communal lifestyle.
Yeah.
But beneath the surface, something else is happening. He's still grappling with his grief, with the memory of his mother, with those unanswered questions, and eventually that struggle finds an outlet in a very unexpected way through writing.
It's almost like he can't escape the pull of language, of storytelling, even in an environment that at least outwardly discourages intellectual pursuit.
Exactly. And this highlights a key tension in the book, and perhaps in Oz's own life, the struggle between action and contemplation, between engaging with the world through physical labor versus through words and ideas.
I see.
He tries to reject his family's legacy, their love of literature, but it's ingrained in him. It's part of who he is.
So even though the kibbutz might frown upon it, Oz secretly returns to writing. And it's not just personal reflections. He begins to write stories, essays grappling with the complexities of Israeli society, the gap between Zionist ideals and the reality of life in a nation constantly at war.
And this is where his own intellectual voice begins to emerge.
Okay.
It's as if he's picking up where his parents left off, embracing the intellectual tradition they instilled in him, but now using it to forge his own path, to make sense of the world in his own terms.
And this voice doesn't go unnoticed. He starts publishing, even garnering praise from prominent figures like David Ben-Gurion, who at that time was Israel's first prime minister,
Right.
a towering figure in the Zionist movement.
Imagine that the prime minister taking the time to read and acknowledge the work of a young kibbutznik.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about the power of Oz's writing, his ability to capture the complexities of the Israeli experience in a way that resonated even with those in power.
It's a remarkable turn of events. The boy who rejected his family name and sought to bury his past through hard labor ends up achieving recognition through the very thing he tried to escape, the power of words. And it seems like it's through writing that he starts to understand his mother in a new light. He sees her not just as this melancholic figure, but as a woman trapped between two worlds.
And this, I think, is where the title of the book, A Tale of Love and Darkness, takes on its full meaning.
Yeah.
It's not just a personal story.
Right.
It's a reflection on the broader human experience, the ways in which love and loss, hope and despair are always intertwined.
Yeah, it's a beautiful and haunting title. It really captures the essence of the book, I think. The love isn't just familial, it's also the love of language, of storytelling that he inherited from his parents.
Yeah.
And the darkness represents the personal tragedy of his mother's suicide, but also these larger shadows of history, the complexities of the Zionist dream itself.
Precisely. And through writing, Oz attempts to reconcile those seemingly opposing forces, the love and the darkness, the personal and the political, the individual and the collective.
As he matures, it seems like he starts to view his mother's struggles less as purely personal and more as a reflection of those larger forces that shaped her life. The way of exile, the loss of her European homeland, the challenges of adapting to a new culture. It makes you wonder if her story is almost symbolic of the broader Jewish experience in the 20th century.
That's a very insightful observation. You see that sense of displacement, the search for belonging, the trauma of war and persecution. All of those themes that define the Jewish experience in the 20th century are woven into Fanya's story.
Oz's writing becomes a way to explore those themes on a grander scale. It's not just his own family's story. He's telling the story of a generation of a people grappling with these huge questions of identity, history, and belonging. Do you think this act of writing, of giving his mother a voice she never had in life, was a form of healing for him?
I think it was absolutely crucial to his personal journey. By confronting his mother's story, by delving into the darkness that consumed her, he finds a way out of his own darkness, the grief and anger that had haunted him for so long.
It's fascinating how his relationship with writing evolves throughout the book. It starts as a source of escape, then becomes something he rejects, and ultimately transforms into this powerful tool for understanding not just himself, but the world around him. Would you say that this mirrors his broader journey of reconciling with his family's legacy?
Without a doubt. He reclaims his family's love of literature, but he makes it his own. He takes that intellectual heritage and uses it to grapple with the most painful, most personal aspects of his life. And in doing so, he creates something truly profound and universal.
So what does this all mean for us? For anyone diving into a tale of love and darkness, Oz's story is incredibly moving. It shows how deeply intertwined personal and national histories can be, how individuals grapple with loss and forge their own identities amidst these sweeping historical currents.
It also prompts us to think about the role of storytelling itself. How does memory shape who we are? How do our individual stories, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, contribute to those larger narratives of our times? Oz demonstrates that even in the darkest of times, there's this enduring power in sharing our stories and finding connection and meaning through the act of remembering.
It makes you wonder about your own story. Where do you fit into the larger tapestry of history? How has your family's past shaped who you are today? Those are some weighty questions to ponder. That wraps up our deep dive into A Tale of Love and Darkness. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. We'll leave you with this. If you could ask Amos Oz one question about his life or his book, what would it be? Until next time, keep diving.